everybody, welcome back to Odd and Untold. This is episode 23, and this week we are talking all things Jersey Devil, and specifically the new movie from Small Town Monsters called Bloodlines, the Jersey Devil Curse. And joining me this week again, my frequent co-hosts, Scott Perry, Josh Diaz. Thanks, guys, for coming on the show. So we're going to talk a little bit about the movie. We're going to talk a little bit about the Legend of the Jersey Devil. I don't want to spoil the movie too much. We're just going to, we will talk about it. So let me just ask you guys, because Scott, I know you're Bigfoot enthusiast, and Josh, Scott and I have kind of pulled you into this world recently, for better or for worse, whether you're willing or not. Were you guys familiar with the Jersey Devil legends before watching this movie, or before I talked to you guys about it?
Go ahead, Scott.
I had been, yeah. I had, since I was a kid, heard the stories. I spent a few summers in northern Jersey with an aunt. And even back then, that was mid to late 70s. And I would still, I was into the Bigfoot stuff, and got down there and started to hear the Jersey Devil stuff as well, which was not Bigfoot, but it was still, really interested me. And had heard, through the years, the different stories of, how it came to be, or the different origins of how the story, unfolded, over the centuries. So I did, I've seen a lot, a lot of different documentaries, and read a lot of different stories on the Jersey Devil. And just, it's a cool story. It really is.
Yeah, I hadn't heard anything about it. Maybe just vaguely, but the only time I really heard of that was with the hockey team. So wasn't really aware of it. I mean, I've heard of like the Tasmanian Devil, but I'd never really heard of the Jersey Devil. So didn't really know it was a thing until I watched this. So.
Oh, cool. All right. So we dragged into something else, another new topic.
Yes. Down the rabbit hole we go.
Yep, exactly. It's an interesting cryptid, and it's something that I think after the internet, people really kind of started hearing about it more. But I remember reading about it as a kid, and I grew up in Brooklyn. I'm right near Jersey. I spent time in Jersey. We had family. My first girlfriend lived down by the Pine Barrens, so she actually took me through there when we were like 16. And she was more concerned about the Pineys who live in there, kind of like rednecks of the Pine Barrens of New Jersey. But I was like on the lookout for a Jersey Devil, and it's one of these things where it's allegedly a cryptid. It's got like the head of like a horse, a very thin body, bat-like wings, cloven hooves. It's a weird creature. It's not something that you really hear about. Like with Bigfoot, we talk about Bigfoot, and it's seen in every state in the union. It's seen in almost every country, like universal. The Jersey Devil is just kind of like just in the Pine Barrens. You don't really hear about it elsewhere. So it's a weird cryptid if it does exist, which I'm not sure it does, because what the hell would it be? If it's a biological animal like Bigfoot, there's got to be many of them. There's not just one Bigfoot roaming the country and he's being photographed here and there. There's got to be a breeding population. So yeah, and I'm just gonna do some screen shares here just for anybody who's watching. We can kind of put up some photos. So there's the Jersey Devil. Weird looking creature. And we're back. So yeah, it was something I was aware of. I'd read about it in books, and yeah, the hockey team, the Jersey Devils, are named after the Jersey Devil, and I was just, maybe it's a regional thing, but I just grew up always hearing about it and reading about it. I haven't, I don't know if there's many documentaries like fully on the Jersey Devil. I think it's been mentioned in other documentaries. It's a short story. There's not a lot to tell. There's the original legend from folklore, the Leeds Devil, or Mother Leeds, and giving birth to the devil, and it's her 13th child. There's the flap in 1909, where there was kind of mass panic and they shut the schools down and there was a curfew. And not much since then. People see things in the woods. down there, but I don't really know of any credible sightings. So very interesting. But yeah, we all watched. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry, Scott.
Yeah, I know. I've heard of Bigfoot encounters down in that area. I haven't heard of, specific what they would call a Jersey Devil. That type of cryptid, matching what it says it looks like. But there are an awful lot of, I get a Bigfoot and Dogman, of course. That's all the rage now. But Bigfoot encounters or sightings down there. But like you said, not so much of an actual, horse face with wings. It's 7 feet tall and leathery, brief toes and all that. That has kind of fallen by the wayside. What a good job that they did do. I think Seth knocked this one out of the park too. Just the way he did it, explained it from all angles. It was just super. What a, just another star notch in his belt for that. I'm going to have to say, because it doesn't push it one way or the other. It just lays it all out with the historical facts from the beginning to present day. And just a good job. I mean, I think that was so well done. It's just everything he seems to be doing. It just, he takes it up a notch from the previous ones, and, tackling this one right on. He did great. What a great job he did.
Yeah, I thought it was pretty entertaining. I mean, I think the production value was real good. I like the history, the experts in the field of, I forget what the experts actually were, but whoever was talking about it was very knowledgeable. I thought they just did an awesome job. Even though like the reenacting, the actors did a really good job. And yeah, it was really good for someone who's never seen or heard of the Jersey Devil. It was really informative. So I feel like I came out of that with a pretty good understanding of what the Jersey Devil is. So.
That's interesting to me, because I think we have like three kind of different familiarities with the legend, whereas I've known this legend kind of inside and out since I was a kid, and Scott's familiar with it, maybe not as familiar as I am, and then Josh, like, you've never heard this before. So I think it's interesting to get your perspective, just not knowing anything about it and going in and watching it, because it's easy when about something. Like if you're watching Legend of Boggy Creek and you already know about it, or you're watching The Beast of Whitehall and you guys are from up there and the legend, it's just kind of reiterating stuff, but like for you to kind of go into watching the Jersey Devil and not knowing anything about it beforehand and finding it informative, I think that's a kind of ringing endorsement there.
Yeah, it was good. It was entertaining. It was a little scarier than I anticipated. I really wasn't sure what to even expect, and I had to actually put my headphones on because my son got scared. So I just put my headphones on and watched it that way. But yeah, it was well done, I thought.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Scott.
I didn't want to, give out too much, like you said, to anybody who hasn't seen it. But it's not a B-rate documentary by anything. He has, Seth surrounded himself with very smart people, and I don't know who, like you said, the facts exactly who they were, but they were historians, all right, and they weren't cryptozoologists. They were credible historians, just telling us the story of how it has developed over the years from beginning, and then you have different people with their strengths telling about what they know and what their take on it. Not just one person, you have a couple different historians, telling what they know up to present times. And, then you have, wonderful narration with Mark Netsky, and it's just so well done. I don't think he could have done it any better than what he did, really. I just think, man, hats off. He did a great job on that.
What was interesting too was just I had no idea what the Pine Barrens was. And like the first time I'd ever heard of it was just camping with you, Jason, with a couple of your stories and stuff. And I think I heard you and your friend John talking about it. And I'd never really, I never really knew what it was. I knew it was some foresty area, not far from where you guys live.
The Adirondacks to the south.
Yeah. And then when they showed like the aerial view or shots of the Pine Barrens, I was shocked at how big it was. It was yeah, so it's a real spooky looking place, and it's definitely remote. And yeah, I mean, I can see why there could be something in there, something, a place that large. How many square acres is it?
Let me check because I actually have some stuff pulled up here. So, um, let me. I can't find it now. um, but yeah, I mean the Pine Barrens is really just like something out of a horror movie. Like if you needed a really good setting, it's perfect for that. 1.1 million acres.
Wow.
So it's fairly large, and yeah, I mean the photos kind of don't do it justice. And I remember anytime I went down to Atlantic City, we'd kind of the highway we were on would kind of skirt the outskirts of the Pine Barrens, and you just kind of look into the woods, and it's just got a real creepy feel to it. And I'm really not surprised that a legend kind of sprung up from there. And the legend goes back hundreds of years, and nobody's really quite sure where it comes from. And it personally, I think it's all folklore. I think it's just a legend. It's just something that someone made up, and the boogeyman of the woods. I actually did a blog post a few years back, and Scott kind of mentioned this, that there's a ton of Bigfoot sightings in the Pine Barrens. So is the Jersey Devil just Bigfoot? Were people seeing stuff 300-400 years ago and embellishing the stories? And because one of the distinctive features of the Jersey Devil is it's like mournful howl and cry, and people would hear this thing, yelling in the woods, and it just was a sort of guttural scream or cry. And so there is some overlap with like traditional Bigfoot sightings and stories and encounters and the Jersey Devil. So was this just a story sort of created to explain Bigfoot? Was it just local folklore? Like it's really hard to say. And like I said, it's a cryptid that's not really mentioned anywhere else. Like nobody in any other state really reported seeing this horse-headed flying thing with bat wings and cloven hooves. Like it's just a weird creature. It sounds like something out of mythology, like something someone made up.
We might have found out what it is, huh, Josh?
Oh yeah. So I'm gonna do the screen sharing again because I had seen this before too, and I was glad Scott brought this up. But I'm going to share the screen again. So here's the Jersey Devil, and you see it's got this very horse-like head and bat wings, and there is this creature that actually exists. It's called the hammer bat or the hammerhead bat, and it's located in Western and Central Africa, and there it is. So, and I'll put links to this in the description for anybody listening on a podcast and not watching on YouTube, but it's a bat, and it has this really elongated head and big eyes, and it's a bat, so it has bat wings. And there's another photo of it, and I mean, it's huge. It's huge, and it looks like the Jersey Devil. Like if you explain the Jersey Devil and you said I saw something with bat wings and a horse head flying overhead, and you showed someone this photo, they're going to be like, yeah, that's it. Mm-hmm. Or if you had a prop maker, make a fake creature that looked like the Jersey Devil, they would make something that looked very much like this. So this is just, I'm glad you brought this up, Scott, because this.
Oh, I'd like to take the credit for debunking. I can't do that. I'm a fan of Josh Gates as well, and I've really enjoyed his work, and he's done a show over the last couple years called Expedition X. It's a typical show like everyone's probably seen, but you have the scientist, and then you have the other person who wants to believe that everything's a monster, and the scientist then is going to tell you exactly what you're seeing. You always have that you have that cohesion between myth and science, the person who one for each. But he did one on the Jersey Devil, Expedition X. And I love, again, I can listen to stuff all day. Because with every myth, with every folklore and all that, it starts with a grain of truth.
Right.
I really believe that. You know what I mean? Whether, you know, whatever it takes. You know, there's always a little bit of truth to, you know, everything that you hear, that eventually, you know, over hundreds of years, it just develops into something that's, you know, bigger and scarier than it is since told the last time. But they had found this horse-faced bat, like you said, Africa, Southeast Asia, and Australia is prevalent from. Back in the 1700s, when the travel become more prevalent, I guess there was actually a story. They had brought these things over for a carnival in the area, and a lot of them got loose. And I guess that's you know, I didn't fact check that, but just listen to what, you know, they had said. They showed all this, brought all this up after, you know, what could this be? Well, maybe here's what it could be, you know, and somebody did the research to see and found that these had been brought over on steamships with the advent, you know, when the colonies and everything, you know, the new world was booming. So, and these things did get loose, and it was a documented fact that a lot of them did get loose down in that area too. So when you see something like, if I had not seen that Expedition X, and I walked out in my backyard and this thing was sitting in my backyard, yeah, all right, that'd have been the tribe soul devil right there, because I'm telling you, that's just not normal. That's not right. I never thought anything like that existed until I seen that show. And I can only imagine what these folks here in the 17 and 1800s, you see something like that. Yeah, that is the devil. No doubt. No doubt.
Yeah,
I thought the same thing.
It's a freaky looking creature. I mean, you think of a bat and you're thinking of, you know, something like the size of a small bird. And this thing looks like the size of a, you know, like a medium-sized dog. I mean, it's you know, it's a big animal. And yeah, if this thing is, like you said, flying around in your yard or, you know, perched up on your roof, you're going to be like, what the fuck is that?
Exactly.
And it's
the devil.
Eats
flowers and fruit, so that's a good thing about it. But of course, when you see something like that, it eats dogs, cats, and you name it, you know.
Yeah.
And just to kind of circle back, I'm going to read this because I'm going to read this from Wikipedia. They produce loud honking vocalizations to attract females. So, like, as I was saying earlier, it's got this scream, kind of like Bigfoot. But again, you have this giant horse-faced thing with wings that screams bloody murder that is not native to New Jersey. It's not something that people in the Pine Barrens are used to hearing. If one of these things did get loose, that's the devil, especially in the 1700s, 1600s, whatever, you know, year this was born, the legend. And anyway, that's what it's going to be, you know, and it's just,
you know, and to kind of add to that, you know, what was interesting is that it seemed that the Native Americans, at least from the movie that Seth put out, that the Native Americans had some kind of already pre-existing legend about it. I don't know how far back that goes, but there was some kind of pre-existing kind of folklore about that with the natives. And then the Quakers came, and the Quakers kind of were able to accept that because it kind of blended in with some of their religious, you know, art at the time, you know, demons and stuff like that with bat wings. And yeah, that's it. That's what a demon looks like, you know. Although I don't think the Bible really gets into exactly what a demon looks like. But hey, yeah, you know, it's a good placeholder for now, right? So yeah, I think that you know, it was ripe for folklore to kind of develop, and I'm not sure how long it takes for proper myth to develop, but I would say a couple hundred years at least, maybe even less. I don't know, but it would seem that this has all the makings, like you were saying, Jason, all the ingredients for a proper myth to develop. And it could be centered around a little bit of the Native American things. Maybe they saw something, an extinct bat or something, or some creature, or maybe it was just completely made up. Maybe somebody just had a bad dream. And, you know, the Native Americans, you know, were known for certain spirit quests. And, you know, I don't know about the Native Americans in the area, so don't quote me on that. But Native Americans, from my general understanding, did have, you know, equivalents to acid trips, you know, mushrooms, peyote, that kind of thing. And they would see things. So I don't know if that necessarily could have been something that they saw on one of their spirit journeys or spirit quests. And then it just kind of, kind of took off once, say, for example, with what Scott was saying about them being brought over as kind of a non-indigenous animal, and getting loose in that area, and then, reproducing and being seen out in the wilderness, out in the pine barrens in the wilderness. It would give more credibility to what's already formulating. And within a couple hundred years, flash forward to 2022, we have a Jersey Devil. And I can see, but that's kind of like what's interesting is from the video, it seemed like two different types of Jersey Devil. There was like the indigenous kind of devil, and then there was the one that like was spawned out of Mrs. Lee's birth canal. I mean, it was pretty. They really took the time to hone in and recreate that scene where she gives birth to the 13th baby and I don't know, she sacrificed it to Satan? Oh no, it was Satan. That's what it was.
Yeah, some of them say it was Satan.
Like
some say the father was Satan. Some say she just cursed it. She was just tired of having kids. And the 13th one, she was like, let this one be the devil, and it came out with bat wings. And
so two different versions. One of them is more of an indigenous one from the Native Americans. Mix that with some Quaker religious, a little bit of religious superstition. Add all that into the mix, and then you kind of have that developing. And then we have this lady, Mrs. Leeds, who has the baby. And then there was also wasn't there something about Miss Leeds? She was like the sister of the person who was killed at the Salem witch trials. Did I miss?
Yeah, I think there was some connection. And again, like these stories are so old, they go back hundreds of years, and it's really hard to kind of, it depends on who's telling the story, because you have the Leeds devil, and some stories I've heard it's Mrs. Leeds, that's her last name. Other stories I've heard it's just a woman and they don't know her name, but she lived in a place called Leeds Point in the Pine Barrens, and that's where the Leeds devil thing came from, because she was from Leeds. So it's really hard to sort of track this back. But like you were saying, like you have like the Quaker dogma of the time, and witch trials, and everything was, they talk about satanic panic in the 80s, but like back then it was, it was like the witch panic. You still had a satanic panic. It was, these women worshiping the devil, they in bed with the devil, they worshiping Satan, and they have these mystical powers, and, any woman they didn't like, call her a witch, burn her at the stake. And again, I kind of feel like anything in the woods we don't understand, let's just call it the devil. It's got to be the devil. It's got to be satanic, because we don't understand it, and it's a little weird looking. So,
and to some credit, there is now there was a Mr. Leeds, wasn't there? He came up with the town Leeds Town or something like that. And he came up with the almanac, and the Quakers didn't like it because the almanac, it got into like astrology, which is a big no-no from a biblical standpoint, from a Judeo-Christian point of view. Astrology is a big no-no. Astronomy is okay. Study the stars is fine, but like, looking at the stars to predict horoscopes, future, that kind of thing, from a Judeo-Christian point of view is a big no-no. So I can see why they were like, oh, he's in league with Satan, and, kind of going that route with it. And I'm not sure was he the husband of Mrs. Leeds? I'm assuming, yeah.
I believe so. I'd have to like watch the movie again, because there's a lot of different stories being thrown out. But I think
I almost watched it twice just so I could get my story straight for this podcast, because that I found interesting. Also, let me go back and look into that. But I think that he may have been her husband.
And I think that's really what it was. And then that was he became the Jersey Devil, because they felt he was inserting occult beliefs into his almanac and occult themes into the almanac. And like you said, that was a no-no. That's, the occult is one step away from Satan, and you can't have that. So he was kind of ostracized, and he was the Leeds devil. He was the Jersey Devil. So it's interesting, how the folklore changes. And I do have to give props to Seth for that, because as much as I've known about this, I didn't really ever know that there was a Native American connection. I didn't know that it went back beyond that, really. And I don't know if it's just that the books I was reading did not mention that. But I had no clue about that. So that was really interesting to me that it even went back before colonial times, that the indigenous people had these legends of this dragon-like flying cryptid in their legends of the area. So that to me was really fascinating as well. And yet to go back to something Scott had said, just I think this is a hallmark of all small town monsters movies. And again, credit to Seth. And I say this in every review because it's not easily found in other paranormal media of our time, but that he doesn't really lead you to any conclusions. You know, he presents, here's a story, here's another point of view, here's another point of view, and leaves it really up to the audience to decide what to believe, what to think of this. Whatever he's presenting, it's always to use a tired phrase, fair and balanced. You know, you get the believers, you get the witnesses, and you get skeptics and historians and people who do try to debunk it and sort of say what they think it might be.
He's
Kinda
just telling the story. He's not taking sides. He's not saying what he thinks or what anybody should think. You know, here's the facts that have been presented. Like you said, take it however you want to, because this is give you several different, stories, from different historians, give you all the history of it from then until now, and, do with it what you will. After that, it was, like you said, let you think about, chew on that for a while.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's what's really missing from everything else on TV or most paranormal documentaries. They're showing you, they're investigating, and then they're saying, oh, here's a picture and here's a red circle around what we saw, and like there's Bigfoot, or here's a ghost, or here's a UFO. They're leading you to believe what they believe, and they want you to believe what they want you to believe. And so many people buy into it, and it's just, and if you try to fight them on it, they no, look, they have a photo, and it's like, because there's no critical thinking there. And at least Seth kind of promotes the critical thinking. He just presents all different sides. He presents the history, which I think a lot of people overlook, and is equally as fascinating, because to know where, you can just focus on the monster, and that's their name, small town monsters. Like, they could just be sensational and focus on the monster, but the fact that all their films kind of delve into the history, delve into all the possibilities, and just you finish the movie not even knowing what Seth believes or what the team believes. It's just, here it is. And each film, he has this real knack for, and Josh, I know you've been starting to watch some of his movies, and Scott, you've watched a lot, and I've watched a lot, but all his films are kind of different. He's got a different presentation style for all of them. Some of them are kind of like 90s, documentaries from a Friday night. Some of them are like 1970s drive-ins, and I really appreciate that he kind of changes it up each time, and it you're not just watching the same sort of cut and paste movie, and it's just the monster of the month or the monster of the year, whatever they're focusing on. And this one, the recreations were interesting, and I think he actually used a lot of his production crew, like cameramen, and I was recognizing some faces, and there was one point where there was a guy on the radio talking. I don't know if you guys picked that up, but there was a guy on the radio in one of the recreations, and that was Seth's voice.
That was Seth himself. Yeah, I had seen that. And
if you see in the credits, I think he's credited as an obnoxious radio host or something.
And like I said, with Mark Matsky doing the, like the narration of it, had a better guy than him. He just has that good voice, that soothing, easy to listen, the voice that you enjoy listening to. And that was well done with the narration of that too. Yeah,
definitely. But yeah, I think most of the cast was just people from the crew and just acting their butts off. And the recreations always get me. I like his recreations. They're very simple, and I think in being so, they just really take you. It's simpler times. You're going back in the past, and there's like this. I don't know what the right word is for it, but like almost like a claustrophobia. Like, these people are in a cabin in the middle of the woods, and you kind of feel that.
Yeah.
And I've always liked that about his films. The recreations are pretty cool. And I've always just liked recreations in these shows like Monster Quest or whatever. I think, sometimes they're funny, but they always kind of put you in that moment. And I thought it was interesting that some of the recreations in this movie were very long, and there's no narration. It's just 10 minutes of a recreation, and there's no sort of context. There's no narration over it. There's no intercuts. It's just, here's a 10-minute recreation of a story.
And you were able to follow what was going on. That's what's nice about it too. It didn't leave you saying, what's this all about? Because you knew it was putting forth what they had explained already. Right. And you were able to follow the recreation too and know what was, understand what was going on. So that was, like you said, real good.
Yeah. So I had mentioned something earlier that there's really no other reports of the Jersey Devil, but I did want to talk about one thing that, and I'm going to put this on the shared screen if I can find it. So there's this other story from England in 1855 called The Devil's Footprints. And I don't know if you guys have heard of this, but it kind of has some overlap with the 1909 Jersey Devil sightings and that flap, because again, in the snow on the night of overnight from February 8th to 9th in 1855, there was a series of hoof-like footprints in the snow. And these footprints went for miles, like over roofs, across rivers. And it really like spooked the town. So here you're talking, after the Jersey Devil legend is in full swing, but before the 1909, I mean, you're talking, 60 years before the 1909 flap in New Jersey, but there were these footprints. And again, I'll link to this in the description below, but no one saw anything that night. But it always, in my mind, linked to the Jersey Devil because it was the same sort of thing. In 1909, people found these cloven hoof prints in Jersey, and they said it was the Jersey Devil. And then they had seen, apparently some people had seen the Jersey Devil. But in England, it was just one of these things where everybody went to bed. No one heard anything overnight, but they woke up the next morning and there's this long just trail of cloven hoof prints and going over walls and on people's roofs, and it was in the snow, and it freaked them out. And again, you're talking, 19th century sensibilities, religious beliefs, and it became known as the Devil's Footprints. And that was another story I'd read about a lot as a child, and always sort of thought about the Jersey Devil when I heard about that. So
there's one thing that I'm guilty of too, when you historical accounts and stuff. We're used to talking 200, of history for our country, 200, 250 years, you start talking about England and that, you're talking thousands of, we are basically an infant as a country, as far as, historical accounts of whatever, because most of the stuff that has become historic has come from England or Germany or immigrants who have brought their stories with them, where these have gone on for thousands of years before they brought them to us. You know what I mean?
Right.
Just like the Rougarou, or which is now turned into the Dogman. But still, you have all these thousands of years of this folklore coming from France and England and Germany and all that. That is basically light years older than our country. We only got a couple, say maybe 300 years, even if you say that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Other than the Native Americans. But so there's a lot of that stuff that has been brought, came across with, immigrants, retold here.
Yeah. What's interesting to me, what kind of stands out is when a lot of times when people get talking about Satan and that kind of thing, they see this picture of this, human-like person, red skin, goat head with horns and cloven hooves. And, as someone who's read the Bible from cover to cover several times over, I don't recall ever seeing Satan kind of personified that way. So I think that leads me to think that in kind of like what you were saying, Scott, in England has a deeper history that kind of transferred over to here, but there's paganism that was going on quite a bit in England and Scotland and all those areas, where I think that's probably where the cloven hoof kind of legend started coming out of. I'm not sure how that even came up. As far as I know, there's no, at least from a biblical standpoint, there's no, Satan has always been personified as like a fallen angel, with wings, maybe, a serpent, that kind of thing. But
so you're telling me that he doesn't look like what it looks like on the canned ham, with the pitchfork and the
yeah. That's all artists. That's not from a biblical standpoint. But I think that whole thing, though, that whole imagery comes from paganism. I really only see that, like, if I see, sometimes you go on Facebook and you'll see different things on there or whatever, some website, and you'll see just pagan or satanic symbols or something like that, and there's just tied to that kind of look for Satan, but that's a pagan thing. That's not necessarily a biblical thing, but it looks like somehow that got integrated into Christian art over the years.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. So it got integrated.
Man, I was at for Halloween a couple times, I think, as a kid. I had the pitchfork and everything, and so you're saying that ain't true. So
yeah, well, I'm saying from a biblical standpoint, but I think that there was a little bit of a mixture, at least in people's perceptions, at least from people's religious perceptions, may have been swayed by paganism, by pagan images of what they believe to Satan, or maybe not even Satan, but just, I'm not necessarily sure what the paganism was of, like, Old England. From a Christian standpoint, it would be considered, obviously satanic, but from the pagans who are doing it, like the Druids and stuff like that, I'm sure they didn't see it as Satan or anything like that. But there was some, and Jason, you might know more of this than I do, but maybe some of the roots of the pagan imagery of Satan with the cloven hooves.
Yeah, I think a lot of that came out through, like, the Middle Ages and a lot of that art. And because like you're saying, I mean, I studied the Bible in high school, and I remember one of my teachers even saying, like, there's no description of Satan in here that describes that he's red, that he has horns, that he has cloven hooves. He was a fallen angel, and he was essentially a contemporary of God.
Right.
And he was just a high-ranking angel and kind of defied God, and he was cast into hell. But there's no description of him as being this red, cloven-hooved, pitchfork-wielding guy with the pointy tail and the horns. And so I think a lot of that came about through Middle Age artwork with pagan influences. You look at the satyrs, which, if you see a satyr, the fawns, I mean, they look very demonic, that they have the horns, they have the lower half, the torso of a man, but the lower half of a goat, cloven hooves.
Sounds like a Wendigo.
Right. So all of these things in mythology and cultures, they kind of, they figure out what they want to be, evil. They figure out what they want to be good and pure, and certain colors get associated, with good, it's white, with, evil, it's black, or these reds, or, these warmer colors, and with good, it's the cooler colors, blues and whites. So it's interesting. And again, I didn't think the conversation would go here, so I didn't do any research on this aspect of it, but
you should know that by now.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I figured you might have known some, because you had mentioned the connection with those footprints. And I'm sure probably it might mention some of that in that Wikipedia article there. But yeah, it's interesting. I always just found that interesting. And through this conversation, and when I was watching the whole Jersey Devil thing, that's kind of what kind of crept into my mind, was the imagery of a devil with cloven hooves, and where did that arise? And then my mind starts working, and trying to figure that out. But I think it is. I think it's pagan roots, and just kind of blended in with a lot of other things, and it just became the accepted. This is what evil looks like. This is what the devil, Satan, Wendigos, Jersey Devil looks like, and
I got a question for you,
we're
Josh.
good with that.
Okay.
Yep.
Forgive my ignorance. What's the definition of a pagan? Now, is that people against normal or goodness and normality? Pagan?
If I were to give a definition of that's a good question. I have an idea of what a pagan is. Like when I think of like pagan, it's someone who clearly doesn't worship any of the like the three main world religions. Islam, Judaism, and Christianity. They're kind of more of a naturalistic. They animals are kind of a part of their worship rituals. It's very ritualistic, which ironically a lot of Christianity and Judaism is as well. But anyway, but it's in a different kind of way. But yeah, I don't know if I have a good working definition for pagan. I think I would know a pagan when a pagan ritual if I were to see it. Like what comes to mind is, torches, Stonehenge, people wearing like antlers and stuff like that, or maybe in a forest, sacrificing goats and, something that, that just kind of looks, I don't know, maybe like satanic as I would think it, but it's hard to really define it. I don't know. Jason, what are your thoughts on that?
Well,
that's a really good question.
I've pulled it up. I mean, because people throw the term around a lot, paganism and pagan. And I think we all kind of know what people are talking about when you say pagan, but it's hard to describe. So right. I looked it up just as you guys were talking, and it says it's a term first used in the 4th century by early Christians for people in the Roman Empire who practiced polytheism or ethnic religions other than Judaism. So it was almost a slur for people on the outskirts of the empire. So people who weren't in the big cities. It was used for rural populations, for populations that didn't believe in Christianity. Of course, they were trying to push Christianity throughout the empire. And if you had religions that weren't Judaism, and they, these other little sort of sects of religious people who didn't believe in Christianity, didn't believe in Judaism, they were kind of lumped in as like pagans. And I think paganism is not one strict religion to begin with. I think it's just kind of these eclectic other religions that were out there that weren't Christianity, weren't Judaism, which were the two big religions at the time. But if you're kind of going through the European countryside and you're finding these little tribes that are polytheistic or worshiping other gods that aren't, our God or Jesus Christ, they're pagan. And again, I don't want to delve too deeply into that, but I think that's
I think that works. That's a good working kind of definition.
Yeah, and I
agree with that.
And I think that's why a lot of people think of pagans as, kind of dancing in the woods around a fire in the moonlight and, praying to different gods. And like I said, you mention pagan to people and they have this image in their mind, and that's usually what it is. Not necessarily devil worship, but it's not Christianity and it's not Judaism. And I think that makes people uncomfortable if it doesn't fit into like one of these major religions. And it's like, well, if you're not worshiping Jesus and you're not worshiping Yahweh, like who are you worshiping? It must be, It must be something not good.
Because from a Christian perspective, it would be, whether directly or indirectly worshiping Satan, whether they know they're doing it or not. So that's kind of how it would be viewed.
Exactly. And I think that was the implication of just labeling these people pagans. It was just, you're not us, you're a filthy pagan, and you don't worship our God, so you must be worshiping the devil, or either actively or passively.
And the term is used quite a bit, especially in the New Testament. When I don't want to make this a big religious thing, but at least when you get into the New Testament, you'll see a lot of there's tons of different religions going on at the time. You had worship, idol worship. You had worship of like Athena, a bunch of different Roman and Greek goddesses. you had, you know, the philosophers in Athens are mentioned in the New Testament, and pagans. And so I think they probably would have been, you know, for a Jew, it's interesting when you talk to a Jew, there's Jews and there's everybody else called Gentiles.
Right.
So you have a Jew and everybody else. And so I maybe the pagans were kind of that, maybe the Gentiles for Christians, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, essentially that's what I'm reading here, is that it was essentially just, if you weren't Christian and you weren't practicing Judaism, if you weren't a Jew, if you weren't a Christian, you were a pagan, because it was just subsets of other religions and polytheism, and that, you know, Christianity was kind of sweeping through that. You can't worship many gods. There's one God, and you got to believe what we want to believe. And that's why Christianity actually adopted a lot of pagan Christmas as we know it is a pagan tradition.
Right.
But Christianity sort of adopted it so as to sort of subdue these other religions, and they sort of said, well, we're going to take this and we're going to take that, and now your religion doesn't really have an identity anymore because now we have a Christmas tree and you can't have a tree anymore. You know, or if you do, everyone's going to just think you're a Christian, and it's a Christmas tree, not whatever it used to be.
Right.
So yeah, interesting stuff. But to get back to the whole devil thing, I do
that question
think
that was quite a question.
That was quite a question, Scott.
So
That was,
I just
we
asked it and I sat back and
let
let you guys go. Thanks. Awesome. Fascinating. Just to listen to you guys talk. We went off the rails a little bit. That's okay.
But that's that's what we do
That's a
here.
good question, though.
Yeah, definitely.
Because I mean, it does tie into, you know, what we're talking about. I mean, you know, the Jersey Devil. I mean, the historical context was a Judeo-Christian context, at least for some of how it was described by the Quakers, you know, and other groups. I'm fairly certain that the Puritans would have described it similar as some kind of devil or demon or something like that. Although there isn't any mention of the Puritans in the video that Seth did. But
so let me ask you this: to bring everything full circle, if I put a Jersey Devil on top of my Christmas tree, is that gonna how's that? Is that gonna cover? We'll be covered, right?
We'll be covered.
Yeah,
you're pagan, you're Christian, you're
good. Yeah,
you're
right.
I guess.
Well, that'd be cool, though, right?
Yeah, you get a Christmas
You might be
tree
the only
topper,
one to have
you know?
that.
So after watching the doc, like, what do you guys think of the Jersey Devil? What do you think it is? Like, do you think there's an actual cryptid out there? Do you think it's strictly folklore? Do you think it's misidentification of something else?
Scott,
well, I think it's folklore. Yeah, I mean, I mean, there's no way to sugarcoat that. I just think it's a good story that started in truth, some bit of truth, whether, you know, somebody saw something somewhere once, you know what I mean? Or maybe even more than once, but it's taken on more than a life of its own, and it makes for a good story. And not that there's anything wrong with that, but I don't think there's a actual physical or metaphysical or portal hopping creature or anything else that's flying around out there. I just makes for a good story.
Yeah, I gotta agree with Scott on that. I think after watching the video, and there may be more information out there, but that video from Seth had a lot of it, and at least enough to chew on for a while and kind of, you know, come up with your own ideas. But I think that you know, there is I think that it is folklore, some kind of myth that developed out of it. I think from the historians' perspectives, they all said that there were so many different accounts, and some people will say, well, like you were saying, Jason, well, Mrs. Leeds was this, and she was this, and then it was this, and then, well, it was that, and you know, and it just, you get kind of lost in the shuffle, like what's the truth behind it all. There was a Miss Leeds, there was a, you know, Mr. Leeds. We know that people have seen some things that are unexplainable, but it just kind of gets buried in all the conflicting stories, that it's hard to know what to believe of that. And there's just nothing seems really consistent. I mean, I guess there are some consistency: bat wings, cloven hooves, and like a horse face, maybe some horns. I think they mentioned some horns or something like that. I would say if there is any truth to it, it's like what Scott said, the hammerhead bat. I think that is probably the closest thing. If that's true and those got released out there, yeah, that to me looks just like the Jersey Devil, just a little less embellishing. But seeing that out in the woods, at night, you're out doing your thing, and it's 1800s. You see that out in the woods. You're going to see that it's going to look 3 times, 5 times as big. Now it's 6 foot tall, and it was really just 3 feet, and it just spread its wings. It's got an 8 foot wingspan now, and it's carrying off a cow. I think there's embellishment that happens with these stories, and people were scared and superstitious, and it was I think there was a lot of embellishment that was going on, and I think it just kind of took off from there. And some stuff got printed in the papers, and I don't know what their journalism back in the 1800s. I don't know how credible it was. I think to some extent there was some credibility, there was some integrity in journalism. Maybe not as much today, but I think there was some integrity to the journalism. But I think it'd be interesting to do a study on that. How was journalism back? What were the standards of journalism back then? And were people just writing things? What was their were they bringing in some bias? Were they bringing in some preconceived notions of what something was? And rather than allowing somebody to develop their own idea, saying, "Oh, Satan was seen with cloven hooves in the Pine Barrens." That's the story, that's the headline, and 5 more people see it 10 years, within 10 years, and those stories get in the paper, and just gets part of history. So accepted history anyway.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, like it's one of my favorite stories. It's one of my favorite cryptids, and I love reading about it. It's kind of local to me. I've been in the area. I mean, there's not too many, I can't go to the Pacific Northwest. I can't, I can't go to where like the Patterson-Gimlin film was filmed. So Jersey Devil always had a place in my heart, but I agree with you guys. Like for me, it's complete folklore. It just doesn't ring true as far as like Scott said, like as being a flesh and blood creature, even a metaphysical creature. Why would it only show up in the Pine Barrens? Why wouldn't it show up in any other forest in any other state of the union?
Well, they did
any
say
other country.
Possibly. Didn't they say they had some reports as far as Philadelphia?
Yeah,
I believe
they said something about the city, didn't they? Yeah, like the city.
Yeah, and it's again, those stories to me are interesting. I mean, I did a blog post a while back about this flying humanoid over Coney Island, and it was, again, people saw this creature in the air. It looked like humanoid, and it had wings, and it was flying out towards Jersey. And people were like, is that the Jersey Devil? And that's a whole other story for another time. But
Mothman,
you have Mothman down in West Virginia. And again, that I love the Mothman story, but I have a lot of problems with that one too, because it's this very sort of compartmentalized series of events and series of sightings, whereas you have something like Bigfoot, which is seen all over. It's seen for years. There's a history that goes back. Jersey Devil, I mean, there's the folklore, there's the legend, there's the 1909 flap, and then maybe here or there.
It's not leaving any physical evidence either.
Yeah, there's no real. I mean, again, aside from that flap, there were some cloven hoof prints found, but it's not like people are just walking through the Pine Barrens every year and finding cloven hoof prints that they can't explain, or sightings, or And again, there are stories here or there, but not nearly as much as there should be.
Right.
To add into this, cloven hooves are found on so many different animals. I mean, if you have an active imagination, a cow hoof, a deer footprint, could be the Jersey Devil. Like, look, a deer walked 5 miles. It's the Jersey Devil, So, I mean, I don't know about the one in England where it's like walking on the roof, that kind of thing. That's kind of crazy, but
reindeer.
Same as reindeer. Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, an overactive imagination could make a cow hoof into Satan's.
Yeah, and again, it's you talk in the 1600s, the 1700s. The Pine Barrens are as far from New York City as you can get, as far from Philadelphia. I mean, people who are living in there, it's isolated. It's like, I think I mentioned earlier, like kind of claustrophobic. Like you're just deep in the woods. There's not a lot of people around. It's going to be spooky, especially for early colonial people. Even early Industrial Revolution times, 1800s, even early 1900s. You got 1909. You have this sighting flap that people are panicking about, and mass hysteria. I hate these sort of, when skeptics kind of use the mass hysteria thing, or the train full of circus animals crashed, and that's how the kangaroos got out or the elephants got out, that people are seeing out of place animals. It's just they're kind of go-to explanations, but I do feel like there's some truth to those as well, where you have some kids who see a hammerhead bat in the woods, or a sandhill crane, and now all of a sudden it's Mothman, it's the Jersey Devil, and there's no internet, there's no way for people to go online and be like, what did I see? Like, let me just type this in. Like right now we can tell there's this hammerhead bat in Africa, but back then they didn't know. So they're seeing this weird creature and they're calling it the devil. And if a bunch of kids see it, then yeah, the townsfolk are going to get up in arms. They're going to get their pitchforks and torches and shotguns, and they're going to freak out, because even back then, the religious connotations are kind of pervasive in the community. And if they've grown up with this legend, if you're just growing up hearing about the Jersey Devil constantly, then yeah, anything unexplained that you see in the woods is the Jersey Devil.
Yeah. Actually, I want to show you guys something real quick. Bear with me just for one moment.
Sure. Interesting to see what Josh is going to show us.
I can't wait.
I can't. Yeah, right.
So this here, it's a little worse for wear. I posted this on Facebook. This is a complete antique store find that my wife bought for me.
Oh, I remember you posting that. Yeah.
Yeah. This is I don't know if you can see that. The binding is kind of taped together. That's how old this thing is.
Wow.
Look at how thick this thing is. Talk about Bible thumping. So when you look at this Bible, I'm going to show you guys some. Let me open this up here. It's got these nice little metal.
Yeah, it's like you're opening a safe.
They don't make them like that no more.
They don't make them like this anymore. This is a King James Bible. I want to be careful with this thing. It's damn old. But I've got to look at the year in it. But it's probably 1800s, turn of the century. It is full. This is probably the Mac Daddy of Bibles. This was the family Bible that got passed on to your kids, to your grandkids. But it's got a lot of art in it, and I'm going to try to find real quick and see if they have any pictures of Satan, and see what would have been in the mind of people when they saw.
You looked under S for Satan or D for devil?
That's a good question. Yeah. But let me see if I can find something. Maybe we could have a quick. Maybe you two could chat real quick, and I'll see if I can find something to Satan, just to kind of see what possibly would have been in the mind, at least from a colonial person's viewpoint. Someone who was in in those olden times, what would have been in their mind as far as what Satan would have looked like. And it probably doesn't have clove hooves, but I'd be suspicious. I mean, if it did, I'd be really shocked. But yeah, this book has just like tons of pictures. But let's see.
Are they colored pictures?
No, they're all like. Let me see if I can show this.
Oh wow!
But you see the angel.
Mm-hmm.
So they had this like I don't know who the artist was. Oh, be careful with this thing. I'm going to be sending it in to get rebound. But yeah, I mean, so the Bibles had like really good hand-drawn art. If you had a good expensive Bible, I would think that your typical Bible probably didn't have a lot of art in it. It probably just had the text.
Like the ones you find in the hotel rooms?
Yeah, like your Gideon's Bible. But yeah, I think
The soft covered Bibles, yeah.
yeah. Well, you know what, Jason, if I do
Yeah.
find one, I'll send it to you and maybe
Okay.
you can pop it onto the podcast.
Yeah,
But I just
yeah.
wanted to kind of give you an idea of just some of the artwork on these Bibles. I mean,
Yeah, I
you
mean,
can even see the artwork.
oh wow.
That's intricate, yeah.
Yeah, very.
So,
So
I mean,
interesting. Yeah.
yeah,
Very
so
cool.
this is an old one. But anyway, I thought I would
But yeah.
show that just because we're talking about old school.
Yeah.
But yeah, if that's the imagery of the time. You know, you're thinking of a devil, you're thinking of some beastly creature. You know, it's not a modern view of the devil. It's not just, you know, a man in a fancy suit, you know, with glowing red eyes or whatever. It's yeah, the bat wings, it's the goat legs, and you know, half man, half beast. The serpent, like you said earlier.
That's even at the end of The Exorcist. Remember the last scene there when he summoned it out of the girl into him? That's what you kind of saw, was like the serpent with the wings, and you know that even, you know, being interpreted as that. And that's, you know, that's what we interpret as the devil.
Yeah.
Right. So yeah, it becomes,
and the little guy on the canned ham with the little beard there and the pitchfork, because that's still that's always a goodie, but an oldie but a goodie.
Yeah.
All right, awesome. So movie comes out today when people are listening to this. It actually comes out, we're recording this on Monday the 14th, but it comes out tonight at midnight. So anybody listening or watching this, the movie's out now. Small Town Monsters, Bloodlines, the Jersey Devil Curse. And I think we're kind of unanimous in our thoughts on the movie, right? Good film, good flick.
Excellent. Yep.
Yeah, very good.
100%.
Presents the history really well, great recreations. And yeah, Scott, like as you said earlier, like they just, each film they get a little better, you know, like they're really honing their skills, and just Seth really has attracted a really great team, talented team. I mean, the special effects are great. Better stuff than you're seeing like on Disney Plus these days with the Marvel movies.
Yeah.
I think the CGI that Seth is putting out there is just phenomenal.
Oh, that's definitely it's definitely it's worse than She-Hulk. That's for sure. I mean, that's for sure.
Yeah,
at least they know their boundaries, you know.
Yeah,
and he's not a multi-billion-dollar corporation to do that either.
Yeah, small team, but the recreations of late. I mean, just all the films, the Bigfoot, UFOs, ghosts, Jersey Devil. It's used sparingly, but it's really spot on. So
and I like how the 1909. Well, if it's coming out, I guess I'm not going to ruin it for anybody. But the 1909 version of the Bank Robbers, and they did it in the old-fashioned talkies.
Right.
No, there was nothing. It was just, you know, kind of like the subtitles as it would have been back then. That was a cool part how they did that.
Yeah, and I dig that. You know, I think some people, if they want to be overly critical, they're going to say that's kind of hokey. But like for me, I think it really transports you back to like that time period.
Yeah,
and again, they're not beating you over the head with it. It's just like here's this recreation like from the silent film era, and we're going to present it as if it's a silent film. And I think that's really clever.
I wouldn't have thought to do that. That was excellent.
Yeah, so I really dug that, and yeah, like Josh said, it's kind of scary. Like they do the recreations really well, and there's something spooky in their simplicity. They're just not overdone. There's not a lot of. It's very just like kind of focused in, and you're just drawn into the. You know, it's not a big production, but that works in its favor to add to that sort of claustrophobia of that you're just in this cabin and this woman's giving birth to the devil, and you don't have to believe in the legend, but it's really cool, and
it is. It's a neat story regardless.
Yeah, and
I came out of it. You know, I came out of that feeling like I have a pretty decent understanding of the Jersey Devil now. I be somewhat conversive on it, and yeah, I thought it was really good. I think for me it did the job, and you know, I thought the production value was good. I thought the acting was actually pretty good. Considering you were saying it was like some of the cast and crew that were the actors. I thought they did a good job, and you know, it was good. It was fun to watch. I had a good time.
Yeah, good. So 3 thumbs up, I guess, right? 6 thumbs up, whatever we want to do. But yeah, everybody go check it out. Bloodlines on the Small Town Monsters website. I'll link to everything in the descriptions below. Guys, any parting thoughts before we close out for the night? on the Jersey Devil? Anything else going on in the world?
It's going to snow on Wednesday. How about that? Ooh, we're supposed to get between 1 to 3 or 2 to 4 inches. What do you think of that?
That's crazy. It's it just got cold here like today. Like 2 days ago here it was like 75 degrees.
So it was here too. It's 27 right now and snow on the way.
Wow.
Yeah. Wow. I'm looking forward to the snow because I was just out hunting just about 2 hours before I came on the podcast here, and it's starting to get cold, but it'll be nice to have fresh snow and see fresh footprints. So that's a plus for me.
I had to ask you about that. And any luck today with the hunting or?
Nada, but I'm confident this new spot is going to work. So it's
cool.
So yeah, I got my new bottle of deer pee. So
I saw.
Man,
just spray that out there, and I'm irresistible.
Hoof prints, nothing will.
Yeah, exactly.
Just don't put it next to your beer.
Yeah, exactly. Don't spray it on yourself.
Yeah. All right, man. Well, good luck out there, and thanks, guys, for coming on the show. And we'll do it again soon.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for having us.
Take care, guys.
Take care.
All right, Jersey Devil. Thanks, Scott, Josh, for coming on and talking the Jersey Devil with me. Like I said, one of my favorite stories. Don't believe in it. Don't believe there's any truth to it. I think it's just folklore, misidentifications, mass hysteria, whatever you want to call it. Really creepy story, really cool. The movie, check out From Small Town Monsters, Bloodlines, The Jersey Devil Curse. It's out now. I'm going to link to it in the description below so you can go to Small Town Monsters and buy it. You can get it on DVD, video on demand, Blu-ray, whatever you want to do. Seth Breedlove, of course, was my first guest on this podcast. So thank you, Seth. He gave me a review copy. Always appreciative of him. Always love his stuff. Always support his stuff. Never lets us down. And just each movie gets a little bit better than the last one. So keep up the good work, guys. Small Town Monsters, Seth, Zach, Heather, all of them. I'm missing some people, but good job, guys. Really fantastic film. So check it out. A few shout outs. Sean Perry, thanks for watching. Stephanie McKeon, thank you for watching. Christy Nelson Keating, thank you. I know you've caught up on the podcast. You've sent me some nice messages, and I appreciate you supporting the show. Happy birthday to Kaylee. She turned 13. So good luck with your new teenager. And yeah, so we'll see you guys next week. Next week, my buddy John is coming back on. He's going to tell us a few more stories, some ones that I was hoping he would tell, but I didn't want to push him because they're kind of creepy and kind of personal, but he's agreed to come back on. So awesome. Stay tuned for that. That'll be next week. So until then, rock and roll, everybody.